Hi there again. This is Dr. Joseph Martin, psychologist, cultural anthropologist, and clinically and mystically trained healer dude here in Victoria, British Columbia. I trust you're having a great day. The topic for this introductory, I guess you could call it a workshop because you'll be having some fun doing some inner work with yourself, is why fear, the fear of death, in fact, is the most critical and essential issue and emotion in anyone and everyone's life to transform and to overcome. Now, first, I think it's important for me to at least state to you that I came into this life consciously from the immortal spirit world. And so I was able to understand in discussion with great spiritual masters and many other great scientists from our recent past here on planet Earth in this solar system in the northeast quadrant of the Milky Way galaxy that, death is an illusion. You cannot die, which will be the substance of the next video. And that, fear of death is the most critical thing that we can get over. Because in a way, yes, we know that we will drop this mortal coil, this overcoat, as the Dalai Lama says, and yet the fear of death gets in the way of everything in our life so that we become zombies, which is kind of where most of us are going on planet Earth these days, and vampires because we have no life energy for ourselves. We have to steal it like parasites from other people. And so the fear of death is the one great thing that stops you from becoming fully alive, from finding out your true spiritual identity, from psychologically growing and maturing and becoming a true open-hearted human being, or unkwehuwe, we say in the Mohawk way, a true-hearted soul. So let me explore with you what can happen when you overcome and transform your emotions, consciously and unconscious emotions, around the fear of death. This is obviously not just a personal issue, it's a collective issue, it's cross-cultural, and it's trans-historical. Yeah, my latest book, my 11th book, my spiritual autobiography, Living in Two Worlds, and this is it here, Living in Two Worlds, A Life of Love, which just came out a couple of months ago, is something you might be interested in reading if you want to know how to overcome the fear of death and live a fully vibrant, joyful, exuberant, creative, spiritual, down-to-earth, healed, out in the world, sacred walk on your good red road. I've had many near-death experiences, and they were all really powerful. Went into the light, spoke to the spiritual masters, came back with a renewed sense of passion and vision. But you know what? I don't really need it now. Because every moment of every day I'm living equally in the spirit world, which is the true immortal spirit world where our soul is eternal, and here in this physical third dimensional earth walk, and putting the two together, and that's my joy in life. Now, as a clinician, as a psychologist, working here in Canada in many cities, but primarily in Toronto, Montreal, and Victoria, I was able to do a lot of inner work on myself, heal myself of all my fears. I chose 500 fears that used to typically come up from my ego, because ego is the liar, the deceitful one, that is the one that creates fear in our mind only, and tells you that these fears are real. But we know that the acronym for fear is false evidence appearing real, but it's not real. It's just in your little brain up here. It's not true, it's not in your soul, and your soul knows that it is immortal. I was lucky at the age of 22 to study and train with Dr. Elizabeth Kubhler-Ross, who is the founder of all the palliative care units in the world, in fact, and I was in the first one in Victoria General Hospital in Montreal. She came up with the whole DABDA scenario, which is the 5 stages of grieving that somebody goes through. There's denial, then there's anger, and then, let me see here, how does that go again? Bargaining, depression, and then some kind of just unhappy acceptance that you're going to die and you don't know what's going to happen and where your soul and your consciousness still exist or not. You don't really know until you get over the fear of death. So training with Kubler-Ross, and I know a lot of palliative care doctors and nurses and staff still have a lot of fear of death, and that's not a good thing in our society. Well, it wasn't until 1974, when I was training as a cultural anthropologist at the University of Toronto, that I met and trained with Dr. Ernest Becker, who won the Pulitzer Prize for nonfiction in the 1970s for his book on the power of death and the fear of death to destroy one's identity. The book is called The Denial of Death. Now, as a cultural anthropologist, Dr. Becker was able to tell people that all of society's institutions, whether it be education or health or justice or even universities, and all the cultural symbols that we have in society are really defense mechanisms, unconscious psychological defense mechanisms, to try to overcome the pervasive fear of death that is in all of our bodies, our emotions, our psyches, our unconscious, our conscious. He's been so amazingly touted around the world that the Simon Fraser University in Vancouver, British Columbia, has a whole program now where you can go and train on this aspect. Now, I know that Dr. Becker himself is probably the most amazing anthropological research ever done in the history of anthropology, and I can honestly say that because I've been trained as an anthropologist for many decades now. I would say that you could go and read his book, The Denial of Death. It's important to realize, though, that you do need to do some inner work around this. With my thousands of clients I've had as a clinician, healer, dude here in Canada, I've realized I used to make lists of, I had over about 500 fears that people would traditionally take about 5 fears per clinical session and work on them through medical hypnotherapy, the Dr. Milton Erickson's medical hypnotherapy, which I used to do with them. And then they would realize, eventually they'd get down and down and down and do a little archaeology of the soul and the psyche till they got to the bottom, and where they could actually simply realize that the most deepest ingrained fear of all is the fear of death. Now, when I studied with Joseph Campbell and brought him to the Jung Society in Toronto when we started in the 1970s, his most famous book at that time, and probably still his most famous book now, is The Hero with a Thousand Faces. Now, heroism as the most perduring, extensive cross-cultural mythology of our time, the notion of the great heroes is more present in our 21st century entertainment and culture than at any other time in the world. Superman, Superwoman, Batman, Spider-Man, on and on and on. Now, these are all the cultural archetypal heroes that we all deem to fantasize about, and there are sort of our inner models. But these entertainments are, again, defense mechanisms against our own need to come to grips with our own personal fear of death. So when you have a hero who is mortal but sometimes can be immortal, you're projecting some unfinished business of yourself onto these heroes or heroines in order to assuage or block or complicate or go unconscious around your own need to become a true hero in your own life. A hero is one who conquers the fear of death, psychologically and spiritually. Now, in further different series of talks and videos we'll be doing, which will be on shamanism, experiential shamanism, which is part of my experience in this life, we will talk about the need to become a fearless, ruthless, intrepid, strong, courageous warrior, someone who is ruthless with their own ego fears and can transmute and transform them to the stage where you can know that you are an eternal immortal soul, have simplicity, strength, kindness, respect. Because when you get to that place where everything is just joy, you know from the inside out that you're a immortal, eternal soul, then all these other things are just play and a lot of fun. To carry on then with this fear of death, I would suggest to do some reading. Kubler-Ross, Dr. Ernest Becker, all these wonderful things about hero mythology, and try to introject, pull back from all your interests on all these great hero mythologies, Superman and so on, to understand that the driving passion inside you, whether you know it yet or not, whether you're a man or a woman, old or young, any race, any culture, any gender, any orientation, it is important and essential and critically essential for you to come to grips with this. When you do, the energy you have flowing through your mind, your emotions, your feelings, and your body, and certainly your spirit, will be just infinite. You will be able to be connected to the source of all that is. And that constant flow, now that you've resolved all your blockages and your challenges and your fears and all the impediments and the dams that have blocked you in your consciousness and your energy feelings, will be gone, and they will stay gone. Now, it's not to say that I don't have fears that come up every minute of every day. And in our society at this time, the 21st century, with all the threats of world war and economic collapse and poverty and tornadoes and hurricanes and all these other things are going on, and a lot of health issues. Now, a lot of the critical health issues are all based on fear. I can say this honestly from the thousands of clients I've worked with. When you resolve the fear of death, can't promise you, and you do need to consult a clinician around this, but psychologically and energetically and emotionally, you will understand and feel greater health and greater energy in you. I myself am a testament to this through my health concerns in my lifetime. When you start to deal with all these feelings and open up, you will find a great, clear life ahead of you. I'm happy to hear from you at any time. You can go on my website, josephmartinlivingintwoworlds.com. It's got some hyphens in there, so you can just Google it. And happy to hear from you and what your personal experiences are about this. But this 21st century is a time now where fears are coming up more and more than ever. And the fact that we've killed 116 million people in the last 113 years on planet Earth just from war alone suggests that this fight or flight conflict within our emotional unconscious and our psyches is how we've dealt with the fear of death in ourselves and collectively over the last forever in history. But the last century, more deaths and more killing through warfare because we're fighting the fear of death. And our reaction, it's not a pro-creative action, it's not a positive action. Our negative reaction is to angrily, out of hate and spite and fear, deepest fear, it's just to kill other people. What we need to do is kill the fear of death and our own psyche. And when you do, you will find eternal life. And as Jesus says, in my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. The truth is, there are many mansions. The soul lives in eternity. When you go into the other worlds now while you're here, and also when you release your mortal coil, you will find extreme joy. Well, that's the substance of our next video, so stay tuned. It'll be up soon. God bless all life, all eternal life, all joy, all support, all healing, and all courage. Om Namah Shivaya.